So welcome to the Happy Mindset Show, episode number 15. Today's episode is called The Artist Coach, and today I'm joined by Cathy Garner. So Cathy is she's a coach, a relationship artist with the last 12 years, and she draws on 4 decades of wisdom and research from around the globe. She spent a lot of time traveling, and today I thought I would like to have her on the show to just talk about her experience, what she's learned, so she can impart some wisdom for the rest of us. So thanks for agreeing to be on the show today, Cathy.
Oh, thanks, Dennis. Thanks for inviting me. And it's really exciting to get to know you a little bit better and to talk to people who are answering these questions themselves about, what makes a happy mindset.
Yeah, perfect. I suppose I'd start off with the artist coach itself. That's what I was drawn to, that because I could see that you're painting portraits, but you're doing them in a different way. So I'd just like to start off with what you do. What is an artist coach?
I've recently been labelled the relationship artist, which I think actually sums it up really nicely, because you say, well, what's a relationship artist? There is no such thing. Well, we made it up, But really what I do is I coach people to find their vision and their purpose in life. And then I use skills teaching and art to help them realise their dreams and their visions. So a relationship artist, the work that I do may relate to an individual or may relate to a couple. I can actually show you. Do you want me to show you some examples?
Definitely. Yeah, they're really cool. They're different.
So this is a couple who I drew about this time last year. They've lent me back their portrait. And what I did with these guys was to just sit them down and ask them, what are your dreams? What are your visions? They were slightly concerned. They've been married for many years, and they were quite slightly concerned that their visions were kind of diverging. So we sat down and I listened to them as they talked about their dreams and their passions and things they'd never even said to themselves, let alone to each other before. And that was really exciting because they were able to hear one another in a completely new way. And as they listened, they could see how they could dovetail, how their dreams might be actually quite different, but how they could support one another in those dreams. And what's been really amazing with this couple particularly is that just a few months after I'd given them their portrait, really odd things for them started to happen. So he'd never mentioned the fact that he was, secretly he'd like to have some kind of leadership role. So 3 months after they received their portrait, he got a massive promotion at work, and he had leadership written in his eyebrows. So the portrait you saw is all just words. So here's one of me. I can show you. I don't know if you can see any of the words if I put it really, really close.
Yeah, we can see it. So, how do you decide where to put the words? And is there any parts of the face that are particular for certain words, or what's
It depends what I'm doing. So with the one doing for myself, it just flowed. I was. I'll tell you the story about that maybe in a little bit. But generally, I will. If someone's talking about something they're hearing, then I'll put it in the ears. If it's something about speaking, then I'll put it in the mouth. If it's really important, then I'll put it right in the kind of central focal point of the face. So I always put the important things in the eyes, but then you can't read the eyes usually because I have to write over and over and over. If you notice that your eyes are really dense, aren't they, and dark, and so you kind of have to write over the top of itself. So I'll also put them around that face, so in the eyebrows and in the forehead, so that you can really read the words. Occasionally I put them in the chin. I've got one of my dad, which has empathy, integrity and wisdom in his chin, and those are the most dominant words, in his face.
Why did you choose the chin? Is there a reason for that, or was it just...
There wasn't in that case. It was just to do lighter shadows. You write bigger words. So when you're writing small, it's more dense and dark. So there isn't that much. If you look at a chin, you don't have a huge amount of shadow there. So I'll show you it actually. So I don't know if I zoom right in there, you can probably see his chin.
Yeah, I can see it. So that's where empathy, integrity, and what was the other word? Okay.
So I get people talking about their values to start with, and then their dreams, and then their purpose in life. And this couple, he got a massive promotion. She suddenly felt really, really confident about herself. And it was almost as though all those things that she'd thought, well, is it really a worthy aspiration to create a home and a family? And that was her focus in life. And she was kind of thinking, well, it ought to be my career, or it ought to be all these other things. And she's great at her job, but what really mattered to her was her home. And suddenly she gained this confidence to be able to just say that to people. This is what I'm about. I'm about hospitality. I'm about opening up my home to welcome people and love people. And all sorts of things happened. So he lost 2 stone in weight shortly after this portrait. And he puts it all down to seeing those words on his on the study wall, looking back at him. And suddenly it's almost as though, I think what's happening is your unconscious mind goes to work to make your identity true. And this is like your identity, isn't it? I mean, what is your face if it's not, it's what you see in the mirror every morning. It's on your passport, it's on your driving license. If somebody says, who are you? You don't normally show them a picture of the back of your hand. Yeah. You show them, even though you know your back of your hand so well, you show them a picture of your face. And so I think what it does is it stops us limiting ourselves with those parts of our brain that have been set up to protect us, all the kind of globe stuff going on. And it goes straight to, because it's an image, I think it goes straight to that unconscious part of the mind that says, okay, this is my identity. I would do whatever I need to do to maintain my identity. And so often we don't choose our identities. They are either given to us or we somehow take them on. So, for example, if you called yourself a smoker, that's actually saying that's my identity. That's who I am. And it's a really powerful thing, your identity. So I'm a smoker. I'm trying to give up. How long will any behavior change last? How long before that habit comes right back? Because it's your identity. You'll do whatever you need to do to maintain that identity. Once you say, I'm a non-smoker, and you really take that on as your identity, it becomes so much easier to quit. And it's the same in life, in relationships, in your career, whatever it is. So for me, when I drew this portrait, I was really, really struggling in my marriage. And I was so upset with my partner that I didn't want to do the right thing. Now, I'm a relationship artist. I'm a relationship coach. I've written the manual on evidence-based relationship skills. So I've got fantastic tools, techniques, experience, things that I know always work. And they have always worked. And I just didn't want to do it. I knew what I should be doing to make our relationship great again, how to repair the stuff that was challenging at the time, but I didn't want to.
How did you get around it?
How did I get around it? Well, I went to my studio to draw, and I didn't really know. At this point, I hadn't really figured out that the portraits were doing something on an unconscious level. So I just went to my studio and I wrote about the wife I wanted to be, and the mother I wanted to be, and the gratitude I wanted to have, and the love I wanted to feel. And I was crying. I mean, as I was drawing this, I was just sobbing and sobbing. And when my husband came home, I sat down on the couch with him. I was still really upset. But something had softened, I think, and I just shared everything. Now, I shared it in a skillful way, so that made it, I was drawing on those skills, but suddenly it was like I just opened up the floodgates, told him everything I was feeling, and somehow he managed to answer that unanswered question, which in the back of my mind, there'd always been this question, are you really there for me? And I think it's a question in relationships particularly that we ask ourselves, isn't it? Are you really there for me? But because it's such an important question, we don't want to test it. We don't really want to test it in case it breaks. So I think that's where I was. I wasn't really willing to tell him all the sadness I was feeling and the loneliness I was feeling in our relationship, because how can you do that without threatening someone and pushing them away? But as long as you do it skillfully, actually people can hear the truth. And so I was able to do that, and I just suddenly knew that he was there for me. He sat with me, he listened, and just held me, and our relationship transformed overnight. So it was no longer just a really functional, nice relationship that was working with relationship skills. It was actually an amazing, intimate, connected, really loving from the heart, and an open relationship in a way that it hadn't been before. So that was really exciting for me, particularly because my background is, I was divorced. I was married at 21 to a guy I met when I was 15. That was pretty horrendous. And I left that relationship, went into the wilderness for a decade, trying to figure out how to find the love of my life, how to date, how to make relationships work. And then literally it was 10 years after I split up that I married my husband now. And I often wonder, you know, it's not particularly that he or I are great at relationships, but it's that I've learnt skills that I can apply. My husband calls it relationship by numbers. I can apply the skills, and it's like baking a cake. If you miss ingredients out, that cake's going to be rubbish. You know, you miss out the flour, you're not going to have a cake. So you miss out the real relationship skills that are based on, you know, decades of fabulous evidence, and you're not going to have a great relationship, no matter how much love there was in the beginning. So so that's a little bit of my journey and a kind of.
What sort of stuff did you get up to in your kind of wilderness period for that decade? What sort of realizations did you have that kind of steered you more back into where you wanted to go?
Well, it was interesting because I left college, having had my first exhibition at the age of 18 in art, and somebody, I don't even know who it was, put those little words into my mind. Well, of course, you'll never make a living as an artist. So I discounted the idea of being an artist and went off to university, studied religion and literature, and then later strategic leadership and management. And I set off working in the health service and then in universities in organisational development, personal development, and leadership development. So at the time when the change happened for me, I was running workshops with groups of leaders and managers in universities, and I could hear myself speaking these wonderful words that was going to help them to lead their teams more successfully. But the words weren't coming from here, you know. They were coming from somewhere slightly outside myself. And it was at that moment that I just thought, I can't keep doing something which isn't completely me. And I remembered how I had felt as a student, 16 to 18, my whole life was my art. You know, I took my sketchbooks everywhere with me. Everything I saw in the world, I saw through the eyes of an artist, and I wanted to create things all the time. So I went back there, and I decided to take a 6-month career break and teach myself to paint. So I went first to Uganda and spent some time in the slums in Kampala with a friend of mine who worked with street kids. And I was drawing pictures of the kids, and they were filming each other playing. And then I was going home at night, and from these tiny little videos, I was drawing and painting. And I think I had about 4 colours that I'd picked up in Kampala, oil paints that I picked up in Kampala. And I was painting these portraits, and I was feeling like myself again. So that was an amazing experience. And after I'd done that, 6 months later, I had another exhibition, which again really felt like me being myself. But the head of history of art, actually, at the university I was working at, said to me, well, don't give up the day job. So you listen to this stuff. And it was coming from a very valid source. So I actually took his advice and went off to Florence. And I went to an atelier, which is where you become like an apprentice to a great artist. So this is how they did it in the Renaissance. You know, you'd have not Picasso. You'd have your Renaissance artists, and you would, and their students would copy them and would fill in all the kind of the clothing. But in return for their work, they would actually be taught methods like sight size method, which is a method of drawing very realistic drawing. So I did that, and somehow I was still held back. So I'd finished all of this, I'd done all of this, and
how long were you in Florence for at that time?
Oh, that was for a summer.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I spent another summer in London doing the same. So there's another atelier there called Lara, which is just a wonderful place. And then I was still at my job because they'd let me take a career break and then come back. But I knew it had to be more than that. So I actually quit my job, and I set out with the motto, earn less, live more, with the idea that I was going to take this kind of newfound skill of mine in painting and feeling like myself, and I was just going to do it. I was really going to go for it. And so I set off, But I was single. I'd been divorced by this time, and I was out there. And actually, the most important question to me at that time was still, how do you make love work? Or is anyone really ever going to love me and be there for me? And so I managed to self-sabotage my art by traveling the world and really trying to figure out how I was going to find love. And I did some fun stuff along the way, and I did do some art. So I went off into the desert with the Bedouin, went into the Sahara and spent some time there. I went into remote Indian villages and worked with women's self-help groups. And that was so inspirational. These were women who had no education, and they'd been taken on by a group that were teaching self-help skills and entrepreneurship skills. And they had no concept of failure. Do you know, to them, all we can do is succeed. So as groups, they would get together and they would campaign against local developers who were dredging sand from their village pond, or they would fight against unjust laws. They were eradicating some of the horrendous things you hear about in Indian villages, where girl children are killed because they're not, they're not boys, and all these things. They were completely transforming their communities, educating and lifting up women so that there could be equality and so that they could have better lives. And so they were a huge inspiration. I also went off to South Africa. I went and helped organise an astronomy festival, and I did some nursing care. I did all sorts of fun stuff just for free. So, and then I organised conferences back in the UK for a few months a year. And it was really, really good fun. But it took me all through that decade, all through learning the science of love. So I studied Professor John Gottman, Professor Sue Johnson, and the really serious relationship scientists who've got a handle on what is really going on in our minds when we're struggling in love. So I studied them, and I brought everything together and created coaching tools that I knew would be really easy for people to apply to their own lives. So I did all of this. I found my man, which is another story in itself. And we were walking in the fields one day when he said to me, of course, art's only ever going to be a hobby, right? And I said, no. And I remember being down on my knees in the field, sobbing, because he'd said something which had so kind of, it had attacked that sense of who I was, my sense of my identity. And I suddenly realised this was actually really important to me, like dramatic overreaction. That's a clue, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you should pay attention. So shortly after that, I found myself at a coaching conference, and I was talking to somebody about vision boards. And I used vision boards myself really successfully to help me find love. I joined a creative circle a few years earlier, and in one of the sessions, we'd been invited to create vision boards. So we had stacks of these lovely magazines from, National Geographic and House and Home and all this stuff. And in the middle of my vision board, I cut out this picture of a woman swinging on a black chandelier with her hair flowing out behind her. And then all around it, I've got pictures of people in exotic places, from all over the world. I've got dark, heavy, carved furniture. And it was a nice, pretty picture. I didn't think too much of it, really. But the same meeting, she also asked us, our facilitator also asked us to write postcards to ourselves from the future, which sounds like a crazy exercise, but it's really, really worth doing. So thinking it was going to be a private exercise, I wrote my first postcard, 3 months in the future. She said, okay, 3 months. I've met the man of my dreams. We're getting on fantastically. Communication is flowing, all this. A year into the future, I'm thinking, well, it's private. We're married. and I'm writing all this stuff about how fabulous our relationship is. And then she said, right, I'd like you to read your postcards to the person sitting next to you. Thank because, by this time I'd been single girl at the party for a good, 8 years, 8 years, I think, by this time. And, I'd be dating, but never anything really serious. And so I was utterly humiliated. Who was I to think that, I could conjure up this man who wanted to marry me in a year? And I did what she said. There was a nice girl sitting next to me, thankfully, and I read out my postcards to her. And then in humiliation, I think I tore them up and threw them away. But within 3 months, I met my husband. Within a year, we were married. And then a couple of years later, I noticed that on the ceiling of our kitchen, there's a black chandelier. Like the chandelier
in the picture.
in my vision board. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, there's something to this vision stuff. And it wasn't conscious, that was my unconscious mind going to work. So if we bypass our rational conscious processes, but we do it by choice, we do it by really setting our vision, what we really, really want out there, putting it out there, then it can be really exciting. So I was chatting about vision boards at this conference to some other coaches, and I suddenly realized, well, of course, I could take words and pictures, images, portraits that I love to create anyway by this time. I could put them together, and I could use images to help people, help my clients in my coaching practice to move forward. So I started doing it, and it's been really, really exciting. So, one example would be a girl who I was working on relationship skills with for about 6 months. Now, she hadn't dated in 6 years. She really, really wanted to be in a relationship. I told her my story. I'd developed a program which takes you from kind of where you are now to attracting your partner, your life partner. And we've been working on this program, and eventually she got around to doing her vision board. And then I said, well, would you like a portrait? She said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So I created her vision portrait, gave it to her. 3 days later, she started dating. This is after 6 years of not dating. So suddenly there's a woman looking back at her who is a woman in a happy relationship, because that was her vision. And I think that unlocked something for her and enabled her to really go for it, and to start dating. And a year later now, more than a year later, we're 15 months later, she's with the guy she wants to marry. And they're having a fantastic, intimate, connected relationship. So it's stuff like that. And that keeps happening for people that I'm working with. So, yeah, it's really exciting. I feel like I've found some kind of holy grail almost of unlocking people's potential, helping people to take what they've discovered as their purpose, that clarity they can discover in words, put it in front of them and have it looking back through their own eyes. And then making it true, realizing that potential.
Oh, it's pretty cool. So the merging of the vision board, and where did the words come from? From the coaching that you amalgamated them together?
Yeah, so I only ever use people's actual words. I mean, it actually started off accidentally, that I was actually writing my own diary in my face. So I was traveling across India, this time with my husband. So we went back to India together. He'd worked in India before, I'd worked in India. We went back to help set up an international school in Tamil Nadu. And when we'd finished that, we went from kind of it was rubble and concrete in the February. In the June, the school opened with 70 kids and a team of 15 really switched on teaching staff who were all doing the international primary curriculum. And by the November, the school was thriving and kind of really going for it. And we decided, well, maybe this is the time to kind of come back to the UK. And he was being headhunted as well for another job. So we decided to come back. Well, we decided we'd have a little road trip first. So we travelled across rural India. And as we went, I drew my own portrait from a little handheld mirror in my hand. I was kind of looking down in the gloom in the evenings and writing my diary, but in my face. Who knows where that idea came from? But there I was. And I noticed as the time went on in my diary how my face changed, from the kind of the challenges of setting up this school and the stress of kind of working in this really intense environment to, wow, I'm on holiday, I'm on this road trip, and how relaxed. And my face really, really transformed over that time. So that's how the actual words in face bit started. And then talking about a vision board and taking it as a vision. So in a way, the art isn't really for art's sake. It's a vehicle to really help people to move forward in their lives.
Cool. That's pretty cool. I think the other thing was when you knew your words were out of sync when you're doing the strategic leadership and you knew there was something missing, how did you start like going more towards your heart? Because I find it can be quite abstract and it's kind of like, where do I begin? So we kind of go, how do I even start? So why I won't even bother. So how did you kind of, when you knew that, how did you move forward from that?
Well, that was when I decided, I asked my boss if I could have a career break. So I just took 6 months off to start with. And I just said to myself, I have to draw every day. So I decided to go to Uganda. It was somewhere I hadn't been before. I knew people there who were doing great stuff. And I just said, it was not a question. I had to give myself an absolute psychological imperative. You must draw every day. I knew I wanted to get back to drawing. I knew I wanted to teach myself to do that. And so that's what I did. And there were many, many days that I didn't feel like it. So I would just like pick up a leaf, draw a little leaf, and then put it down. And, at least I'd done it. So it didn't really matter that I wasn't doing anything amazing to start with. And in fact, I remember the first couple of portraits I tried to draw. When I was 16, 18, I was drawing fabulous portraits that actually looked like people. And years and years later, I was looking at these portraits I was drawing and thinking, I will never, ever be an artist. There is, I couldn't show this even to the person I'd just drawn a picture of. I was drawing and looking at it and thinking, can I see what you've drawn? No, shutting the book, absolutely not. But day after day after day, it only took really about 3 months to go from really, really appalling to recognizable. And then it took another, let's say 9 months when I actually got my portraits, the painted portraits, big painted portraits ready for my first exhibition.
Okay. And at that time when you decided you're going to do it every day, did you have any expectations or like why did you decide I must do this every day now?
Well, I knew that I had to be me. I knew that I had to come back to who I was. And I knew, even though I self-sabotaged after that, at that point, I had this clarity that, this is who I am. I am an artist. I am a creator. My entire childhood had been about creating an art. And then I'd let it go because really the reason I think is because unless we ask ourselves the right questions, we get the wrong answers. So I've been walking around probably from the age of about 5 when my little 5.5-year-old boyfriend dumped me. I'd ask myself the question, will somebody ever really love and be there for me? And that was the question I was seeking to answer. Now I should have been asking like, who am I? How can I be my best self? How can I contribute my uniqueness to the world? How can I live my best life? But those questions really weren't there at that time. And it wasn't until years and years later when somebody said to me, what are your aspirations? I thought, I've not really even thought about that. All I'd thought about up until that point was, how can I make sure that there is love in my life? And that was what led me into a disastrous marriage, because somebody turned up who was determined to love me, whether I liked it or not. And so I was like, great, questions answered. But I hadn't thought, well, who am I and what do I need and what do I want to give? And I remember saying to somebody when I was in that marriage, just saying, well, I don't have a personality, because little by little I allowed somebody else's needs and wishes to be the only important thing. Because all I was trying to do was answer that question, will you be there for me? Will you love me? Instead, when I set out to answer the question, well, who am I? How can I be my best self? How can I live my best life? Because I knew my single life, working with leaders and managers, while it was okay, it was good, it wasn't my best life. And I knew that because of that moment of speaking from somewhere outside myself.
So then it was going back to art that you kind of started to go more towards yourself and see what you wanted from life and find your own passion and love in life first.
Yeah. And those little anchors, even though I still went back because I hadn't realized that I was asking the wrong question. I still went back to that question, and eventually, that's helped because I'm now teaching relationship skills as well as the art. So I'll help a couple create their portrait, and then, there are 10 relationship skills that really help you to live the life you want to live. But we don't most times in relationships, we don't even know that having a vision is really crucial to a successful relationship. This is what the research has shown. There are really just 3 things you need to do right to have a fabulous relationship. One is to have a fantastic friendship. And it's a big cliche, isn't it? But there's a lot more to friendship than we realise. So there's whole layers of that. There's about different...
Or what sort of stuff are we overlooking in friendship that's quite actually vital from your experience?
The biggest thing, well, there are 5 things, which are all big. I could tell you them all if you want, if you've got time.
Yeah, tell them all.
Possibly the biggest is really welcoming somebody into your world. Are you, and this is the question we need to have in our mind when we're in a relationship, am I welcoming my partner into my world right now? Not is he welcoming me or is she welcoming me? Am I welcoming my partner into my world right now? Another level of friendship is how are we valuing our partners? How are we expressing our admiration and appreciation? So again, asking yourself that question, am I expressing my love? Am I expressing my admiration and appreciation? Not, is he appreciating me? I'm feeling underappreciated. I'm feeling taken for granted. Change the question. Change the question to, am I doing it? So then another level is, am I being responsive to my partner? Research has shown that if couples respond positively to one another, 86% of the time or more, their relationships are likely to thrive. Where couples are not responding, which could even be just, you've got the telly on, your partner's saying to you, oh, have you seen this in this magazine? Or look at the view, isn't the sunset beautiful? And you're blinkered to it. If you're not responding to your partner, and that's happening a lot, the chances of your relationship actually having that level of trust and belonging that you need is very slim. So there's some great research around that. But am I being responsive? Am I saying yes to my partner? And then am I spending time with my partner in a way, and I'm really treasuring the time we spend? And there's a lot of research about how long we need to be with our partners, how much quality time we need to spend if we want to ride out the storms of life. And then, do I really understand my partner's language of love? Now, you might have come across love languages. They are just, it's brilliant. It's so simple.
What are love languages?
Okay, so there's there's 5 love languages. It's basically, we have a mother tongue, right? Mm-hmm. So we speak in our mother tongue, we understand in our mother tongue. If we try and learn a new language, we don't get it straight away. Mm-hmm. So we sometimes really struggle with another language. And if someone says to us, it's good day, would you know what I was saying?
I'll take a guess. No, actually, I have no idea actually. Is that Norwegian, is it? Or what?
So that's Norwegian for I love you.
Okay.
Now, it's the same in our lives. If I am doing something to show my love to my partner, but if it's a foreign language to them, then they won't feel loved. They'll feel like instead of saying I love you, I'm saying yes, good day. They don't hear it. And there are 5 ways of loving, 5 main languages, if you like. One of them is spending quality time. For some people, what really matters, they feel loved when you spend one-to-one engaged time with them. Now that may be doing activities together, or it may be that kind of heart-to-heart looking in each other's eyes. For other people, that's it's not that relevant really. I'm going to feel loved if you actually say the words, I love you. Or if you tell me that I'm really great at something. If you give me words of affirmation, you say, you're such a fantastic artist. That's going to make me feel loved. It's actually not my love language, but if it were, that would ring true. That would hit home. For other people, it's physical touch. It's all very well to say nice words, but if you don't give me a hug at the end of the day, if you don't want to be close to me, then I don't really feel loved. For someone else, it may be, well, touchy feelings are all very nice, words are all very nice, but if you're not going to actually help me, if you're not going to cook or clean or, earn a living to support our family, or if you're not going to do these acts of service for me, then do you really love me? Are you really there for me? Have I given you 5 or 4? Oh, there's one more, yes. So other people, it's actually gifts. It's a tangible thing that is symbolic of love. So it may just be a flower picked from the garden, but it's something tangible that says your partner's thinking about you when you weren't there, and they want to give you something. It may be little love notes. It may be lavish, fantastic gifts. But, you know, different things ring true for different people. Different things are their primary, natural mother tongue when it comes to love. So we need to learn our partner's love language. My husband and I actually have, his first love language is my least known language, and the other way around. So my love language is his least known language. So we really have to understand this, and we really have to learn each other's language so that we can feel the love that we do have for each other. You know, because when you first get together, you do all of it. You do gifts and you do spend time together, and you're always touching each other, and you're saying wonderful things about each other, and you're doing, you know, stuff to help one another. And then suddenly you relax, don't you, into your natural patterns. And unless you know your partner's language, you know, you don't realise that it's so important to use it. So that's friendship. The other thing, that's the first thing you need to get right in your relationship.
So those principles are the same for even just normal friends too, just in a friend's context. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what friendship is. It's a lot more. There's a lot more to friendship than we ever realise. And essentially, it's just, are you there for me? And are you there for me in a way that speaks to me? So that's that friendship bit. And then the next bit, the second thing we need to get right in our relationships is our emotions. You know, they're the wind in our sails. They're the thing that make the relationship really go somewhere. But they're also the thing which usually, you know, makes us fall apart. Usually because we don't know how to manage our relationships with one another, we create conflict that escalates, and we think it's the end of the world. We think it's the end of our relationships. And so we break up. Instead of learning how to repair, we actually think it's the end. We think it's over. So that's the other big bit. And then the third bit is having real meaning and purpose in our relationship, having a vision, knowing what our dreams are, supporting our partner in their dreams. So if we get these three things right, then our relationship's really going to go somewhere.
So what's occurred to me with the line of questioning, it seems like it's definitely a productive way to head into a relationship. But does it depend on how solid you are in your own love of life and your own kind of who you are first? Because I think we're asking those questions from a place of, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I want to do. You can start drifting into their world more, and it's not actually going to help. I think that's where it can get confusing.
Yeah, I think it's...
Wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to start with vision and purpose. So I get people individually. So I've got these little workbooks that you start with your vision and purpose, and you ask yourself questions. You know, what are my values? What are my dreams? What are the things that I've forgotten about, that I've squashed down? I mean, it took me a good decade to even uncover that stuff, but it's really easy to uncover. If somebody sits down with you, if you have a coach, somebody sitting down with you and actually saying to you, you know, what are your dreams? If nothing was stopping you, what would you do? When you get to the end of your life, what do you want to look back on that will make you feel really proud, make you feel like you had a fulfilling and purposeful life? And then, you know, really just sitting down and going, okay, what is my true purpose in life? Just spending time on your own, figuring that out until it touches your heart. And so I use a whole load of fantastic exercises to help people to get to that place where they really know that this is what they're about. And then once you've got that, you can communicate that with one another. That's then about welcoming each other into your world and sharing all that stuff that's really at our hearts and about who we really, really are.
Yeah, that makes sense. So once you're kind of solid in yourself first, you can start building the communication patterns that are effective.
Well, yes and no. Do you know that idea that we have to be solid in ourselves? I think we have to, there's a sense of having to know ourselves.
Okay.
But I also think, you know, we're open limbic systems. We are not designed to be islands.
Yeah.
Our psychology is a psychology that works only when we're in connection and communication with other people. And that may be friendship or it may be intimate partnership. But it's so important. You don't need to feel that I've got to be all right on my own first.
Yeah.
there's an element of which, if we are brilliant at being on our own, we've developed a skill set that doesn't necessarily help us when we're in a relationship. So there's a whole load of independent skills that we need to unlearn when we move into a relationship. They're great when we're independent, and develop them, use them, thrive, run around the world, do fantastic, exciting things, depend on yourself and all of that. But when you come into a relationship, you need to actually say, no, this is about us now. What are we creating together? What's the give and take? What's the compromise? It's a horrible word. And there are people online, I look at other relationship gurus who are not really working with evidence-based, but they're working on their own inclinations and intuition. And they might say things like, never compromise. Yeah, compromise. We need to build something together when we're in a relationship. Compromise is part of that. Supporting one another, actually giving to our partners as well as to ourselves is really fundamental.
Does that come back to accepting, I suppose, the struggle as well in relationships rather than it being like some fantastical thing of no problems kind of thing?
Well, the conflict, when we look at conflict, it's actually probably our biggest tool to deepening our intimacy with each other. So now I try, it's not easy, but now when my husband and I have a conflict, I go, okay, I know that on the other side of this pain, we are going to be so much closer. We're going to understand each other so much better. And then it's about having the courage to step into that and into the conflict in a skillful way and move through it and really get what's behind the conflict. So one of the questions I get people to think about is, what's the treasure that's beneath the conflict? If you imagine, when you're having a conflict with anyone, you're kind of doing this, aren't you? And if you have that conflict more than once or twice, it's an indication that you should stop and take a look at what's really going on. Very rarely is the thing. Usually, the conflict is hiding something very precious that's inside the palm. You're protecting something, and it may be you're protecting your freedom or your sense of equality or your sense of identity. It may be that you're protecting your need for respect. Some of these really basic, fundamental things that make us who we are and what we believe in, our values, are often being protected when we're fighting about you not doing the washing up or turning up late again. Or, these are not the things. And what you can do, you don't even have to agree. Most counsellors will help you with conflict resolution and maybe communication skills. But what the research has found is that you can happily live with a lot of conflict, things that you don't agree with, as long as you find a way to understand what's inside. So an example of this in my relationship would be timekeeping. One thing, my husband and I we're not on the same wavelength when it comes to time. So for me and for him, we clash, or we have done in the past. We had a lot of conflict around timekeeping. And when I noticed this, it's like, hang on a minute, what's really going on here? And we started to ask, well, why does this matter? And he was saying, well, in my day-to-day work, I'm having to be on time. I'm having to watch the clock. I'm having to be there the moment that schedule says I need to be there. And at weekends and when I'm with you, this is about freedom. This is about being in flow and just loving our life together. It's like, wow. Okay, so for me, being on time is about respect. So I would want to be on time, and I'd get really antsy. And for me, that comes from my childhood. When my dad was dating my mum, the clock would chime, and my dad would knock at the door in the same moment. So throughout my childhood, I learned that respect, a symbol of respect, was being on time for someone, and it's a symbol of being there for them. And so when we realise this, we can kind of take it in our stride. It doesn't mean we're ever going to agree. I'm never going to think, yeah, it's great to be an hour and a half late. And he's never going to think, yeah, it's great that she keeps pulling me up on my timekeeping. But because we understand the treasure, we can live with that conflict, and it doesn't sting. It's not a problem. We can still have that depth of intimacy. And in fact, I know him better, and I can admire him more because we've gone through to that point where we really understood the treasure.
There's about a sense of respect, and I suppose once you're clear on kind of what's the actual issue here, then is it?
Yeah.
So like, how did you get to that in yourself? Was it from experience? Like, was it like a recurring kind of thing that you saw and you were like, I need to kind of deal with it? Or how did you get to that kind of understanding of it?
My husband calls it relationship by numbers because basically what I've done is I've looked at the best research in the world right across the globe, and I've tested everything against what the Gottmans do. Check out the Gottman.
Who are the Gottmans?
They've done 40 years of incredible longitudinal studies looking at a fraction of a second interactions between couples, testing their heart rate, testing the cortisol levels in their wee when they're having an argument. All of this stuff. It's really minute detail, and they really understand the really simple elements that go into a relationship either working or not working.
Okay.
So I test all the research, all the kind of wisdom literature. I test it all against what they say. And Sue Johnson's the other real, fantastic work that she's done around attachment theory with adults. Mm-hmm. And that question, are you there for me? Like, you see a baby crying for its mother and it continues to cry. If its mother doesn't respond, what's really going on in the brain is the brain is freaking out because, you think back to our evolutionary past, that child is going to be eaten by prairie dogs if its mother is not there for it and responding. Now, when we grow up, we think we don't need that anymore. But in a romantic relationship, what we've really said to each other is, I'm there for you. I'm going to be there for you. And so you ask, are you there for me? You say, are you going to help me with the washing up? If your partner says no, even though it seems like a completely tiny thing, and you may not even know what you're doing, but in the back of your mind, in your brain, that little light is firing. And it's still going on. We don't see it on our faces. You do notice it in your heart rate. Your heart rate starts to rise. And you notice it if you go into an MRI scanner. So a number of women went into fMRI scanners and were told they were going to get electric shocks when a little cross showed in front of them. So women who are in secure, loving, protected relationships, and they were holding their husband's hand, felt little or no pain and little or no panic. So the parts of that, the crazy part of the brain that would be crying for the mother wasn't lighting up. When women were in unsafe relationships, and relationships where they felt their partner wasn't there for them, even holding their partner's hand, the pain was still there. They were still very scared when they were seeing, the brain, the oldest part of the brain was still firing off. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating stuff. So I've taken all of that research and I've put it into 10 skills that if you get these skills right, the chances of your relationship failing are pretty minimal. So he calls it relationship by numbers because when we do this stuff, it works.
So that's the main thing, isn't it? It works and there's less misunderstandings between the people, I suppose. So that's what you mean by research-based evidence of love and communication is the science behind it.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mission really, because very little of it really filters down into the public awareness. How do we know that these skills are necessary for a loving relationship? I remember I asked my dad what was important in marriage, and he gave me one word. He said politeness. And I just thought, no, it is not about politeness. It's about passion, But in a way, he was right. And of course, it's about passion too. But there are elements that we have blind spots, don't we? And it's not until we look at the research, really, and we see the full picture. There are all these skills, and they're not difficult. But unless we know them, we can be falling down on really simple stuff.
That's it. Like you don't learn this
built into our lives.
You don't learn this stuff from movies and stuff. That's the thing. Like you see the passion and stuff, but you don't see the practical stuff day to day where you can make a long-term relationship from.
Yeah, well, very, very rarely do they ever give you what happens after the happily ever after. And very rarely is the happily ever after a happily ever after. You ask any couple who've been married for a long time, they'll tell you about those struggles. Even the fact that most of your conflicts, more than 50% of your conflicts, will never be resolved. And that's okay.
I didn't know that. More than 50% of your conflicts. Is that the agree to disagree thing?
If you go and if you read John Gottman's research, 69% of couple conflicts don't get resolved. but that doesn't matter. What matters is, can you live with it, can you find the treasure, and can you value and respect one another's differences and welcome each other into your completely different worlds. To see that you can contribute even though you're so different, or perhaps because you're so different.
So that would be unconditional love you're striving for there, I suppose. That's the treasure there, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff. So what are you up to now these days, Cathy? Is that your main thing, the artist coach, or do you do speaking as well, I think? No? Or
yeah, well, the main thing I'm doing at the moment is doing the portraits, but also doing courses.
Yeah.
I ran a lot of workshops in the past, in my old life, in personal development, and right from the age of about 16, 17, I was running courses, whether that's climbing and abseiling and social skills or leadership skills, but this is the first time I've actually taken all the relationship stuff and the vision and purpose stuff and put it into something that we can do in a group together, which obviously makes it much more accessible for people.
Yeah. So you've done all the kind of data gathering, the experimentation you need, and know what's going online. You can, that's very good.
Yeah.
So,
and also creating exhibitions as I go. So creating more portraits of people. I had an exhibition actually last year of people. These are some of the portraits.
Because you did some with Alzheimer's patients too, didn't you?
This is them, yeah.
Okay.
So this is them using the same approach, using the vision portrait approach to tell the story of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So this is people telling the story of their lives, what's been important to them, what their values were, or have been, what's been, really significant in their lives.
What has been their reaction to it in the dementia patients? What's been the reaction to this?
Amazing, really. I mean, you kind of, often people are sidelined when their brains are not working in a traditional, normal way that we expect. People don't know how to respond to you. Yeah. So actually people found it really wonderful that somebody was there listening, just to be able to tell their story, to know that someone wasn't going to interrupt them, to be able to get to the nub of who they are. And that's the thing that goes last. We retain this sense of who we are. And that really came out. It was like the people who I was working with were shining out their essence. Whether that was to love people and be playful, or whether that was, one chap, I'm a bit of a joker. Another chap, I'm an adventurer. And he'd talked about his travels all over the world. And some of them may not have actually happened in the way that he relayed them, but that was his essence. Someone else, it was about her family, and it was about nurturing. I think she had 7 children, so it was all about what was really, really important. And your memory may go, but your essence is still there, and who you are, your identity remains. And it was a huge privilege to do that project. I've done it with clients as well since then. So I've worked with some older people since then doing their portraits, and that's been a huge privilege.
That's very helpful to know actually that the essence stays, because even when the mind or the memory goes and stuff. Yeah. I think it gives a bit of humanity, humanizes people a bit again. So it's nice.
It was powerful. I think people's reaction to that exhibition as well was really, it was a surprise, and actually, okay, so hopefully it raises awareness that people are still who they are, and we can still connect, maybe in different ways, and maybe we need to learn different skills to be able to connect with people whose memory and language isn't working in the way it used to. There was one fantastic man called Andrew Knights, who runs music groups for people suffering with dementia of whatever form. And the conversation, he talked about this, a wonderful conversation that he has with people through music, just how people come alive. And when you're singing songs and playing tambourines, you can barely tell the difference between the person who's supposed to be the carer and the person who's got a condition. So, really fabulous work.
Very good. I guess my last question for you is throughout your journey, was there any book that stood out in your mind that was like a kind of a pivotal book or something that really gave you like a different view on things?
Well, I think it would have to be Gandhi. It would have to be his Experiments with Truth. Not that I didn't like the detail of the book. I'm not a detail person. So it was for me, it was a bit of a trawl through all the long unpronounceable names of people that were with him on his journey. But it was really getting to the essence of how do you become the person you want to be. And I walked 360 kilometers in Gandhi's footsteps with 600 people from India and Pakistan and all over the world. And we followed the trail of the Salt March for a month together, just walking and talking. And it was the most incredible journey. And at the start of the journey, we started at Sabarmati Ashram, where Gandhi lived. And there was an exhibition which was talking about all the things he gave up. You know, he wouldn't have spicy food or rich food. You know, he certainly didn't drink. He gave up sex, even in his marriage. He gave up all the things that we think are important for our happiness and for our enjoyment. And I just could not understand this. Like, why would you give up the things that are what you're living for? And as we walked along the path, and I heard Gandhi's great-grandson, Tushar Gandhi, speaking about his great-grandfather and explaining how when you train yourself in peacetime to do the most challenging thing you can, then when you come face to face with someone who's going to attack you, you can turn the other cheek. You can actually do the thing that is least likely. You know, because you're so in control of your desires. If your real heartfelt desire is to be a peaceful warrior, you know, and campaign peacefully, then you can do that when you've given yourself that level of training. So I left that march really inspired, and reading his book, you know, that comes across so clearly. And I gave up alcohol, and I gave up relationships, and I gave up meat for a whole year to train myself. I mean, those are small things. Yeah, I didn't give up all the nice things that Gandhi gave up, but I gave myself a period of training just to see whether that would change my life in some way.
What did you learn when you gave those things up?
I learned that you don't need all that stuff to be happy. You know, it's the trimmings, and it may be lovely. You know, there's nothing wrong with any of it. But real joy is something much, much deeper. And real joy is about being who you are, finding your purpose, whether that's just to be yourself and for that to be okay, whether it's to welcome joyfully whatever comes, whether it's to be generous, whatever that purpose is for you, to be living in that and actually able to do it. You know, so, you know, through meditation, I meditate and I do yoga, and I'm continuing with my own training through those kind of disciplines. And just that you can learn to be yourself. And it comes through, in a sense, it comes through denying yourself some of those things that you might naturally want to go to. Because if we're swayed by our immediate desires, we will never be those strong people that we really, really want to be. Yeah. We're not going to do something amazing on a big level until we've done something amazing on a really small level.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's easy to get lost in all that stuff. It's all noise until you start realizing kind of where your answers lie, I guess. So it's cool. Thanks a lot for the conversation, Cathy. No worries. Thanks a lot for the conversation, being so open and honest about everything. There's a lot in that, a lot of stuff I learned today as well.
Oh, I forgot to say, if anybody wants a Vision and Purpose workbook,
okay, then
just drop me a line on Facebook.
All right.
The Artist Coach. Drop me a line, or drop me a line to my email, Cathy, Cathy, at theartistcoach.co.uk, and just say you'd like to have a copy of my Vision and Purpose workbook, and I'll send that out to you.
Oh, so that's free, is it?
That's free. It's a great resource. So I had some feedback recently of a woman who'd worked her way through it, and she said, I'm doing everything differently now. I know what my purpose is. and it's changing. It's affecting every decision I'm making.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that's a really nice idea, actually. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, somebody.
Really welcome to that.
Cool. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.